Welcome to this explainer on the hidden architecture of human laws. Have you ever felt, like you're just a tiny cog in a massive machine when you're dealing with some big institution? It's a pretty common feeling. Well, it turns out there's actually a hidden architecture behind why our human societies are structured exactly this way. Today, we're going to decode the whole thing together and explore why modern laws and bureaucracies so often feel completely disconnected from human nature. Let's get right into it. Okay, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll kick things off with the paradox of modern law, then look at the three tiers of human systems, dig into the roots of natural law, examine the rise of positive law, and wrap up by mapping out the 5 levels of order.
Section 1. The paradox of modern law. So we're starting with a frustration I think we all share. That sinking realization that the bureaucratic rules we live by often feel, well, entirely soulless.
Ask yourself this core riddle. Is it actually possible to obey the law but still act completely against human nature? I mean, it sounds totally contradictory, right? But it's our current reality. Right now, humans live under systems that enforce rules, sure, but they don't necessarily ensure our upward development. They just don't always align with our biological, ecological, or psychological growth. Think about it. You can literally be a perfectly law-abiding citizen, yet be completely disconnected from anything resembling genuine human flourishing. And that brings us to this absolutely crucial paradox. Obeying the law doesn't automatically mean you're aligned with the philosophy of human flourishing. On the flip side, breaking a rule simply drops you into a mechanical, institutional system. Think of a prison or a complex court workflow. Those systems, they have their own strict internal logic, driven by administrative necessity and compliance, but absolutely zero philosophical grounding. It's coherent, sure, but it isn't meaningful. Section 2. 3 tiers of human systems. To really understand how we ended up living inside this paradox, we need to map out the underlying architecture of human organization. It basically builds into a 3-tier hierarchy. At the very top, we have Tier 1, philosophy. These are the life-aligned systems that answer the big why, things like natural law and upward civilizational progress. Then we drop down a level to deontology. This tier creates rules purely out of administrative necessity. It answers the what. Finally, we hit the bottom, Tier 3, systemology. This is the institutional machinery that mechanically processes humans through bureaucratic workflows. It answers the how. The big problem today, we are essentially trapped in Tiers 2 and 3, completely severed from that foundational Tier 1. Moving to Section 3, the roots of natural law. To figure out how humanity originally built that foundational first tier, that philosophical baseline, we have to look way back at the origins of natural law. For that, we're traveling back to ancient Greece. Thinkers like Plato and Aristotle put a massive emphasis on this idea of a universal natural justice. They argued that this justice exists entirely independently of local customs or whatever conventions happen to be popular at the time. Their view was basically that we live in an orderly universe, right? So what is deemed right by nature should be the exact same everywhere, acting as this higher standard for all human behavior. Later on, the Roman philosopher and statesman Cicero expanded on this beautifully. He argued that natural law actually obliges us to contribute to the general good of society. For Cicero, laws shouldn't just be arbitrary, annoying rules. They should act as a reformer of vice and an active incentive to virtue. He firmly believed that positive, human-made laws are only valid if they actually align with this much higher purpose. In fact, Cicero brilliantly defined eternal law as an unchangeable standard. He wrote, "There is indeed a law, right reason which is in accordance with nature, existing in all, unchangeable, eternal." He went on to say that absolutely no one, not the people, not the Senate, can absolve us from it. It's not one thing in Rome today and another thing in Athens tomorrow. It's eternal. And its whole purpose is to unite humanity under one shared moral compass. Fast forward a bit to the Middle Ages, and we meet Thomas Aquinas. He took these classical ideas and synthesized them into a highly consistent system. Aquinas argued that because humans possess reason, everyone has an intrinsic set of rights that literally no one can remove. Therefore, any human law has to be judged by how well it conforms to this universal natural law. If a rule doesn't promote human flourishing and virtue, well, to Aquinas, it wasn't truly a law at all, just a perversion of one. Section 4, the rise of positive law. But as history progressed, this purpose-driven view faced intense criticism, which led to a massive, fundamental shift in how we structure society. This criticism gave birth to legal positivism. This is essentially the blueprint for our modern bureaucratic paradox. Under positive law, rules exist simply because someone in power enacted them. They are completely detached from any higher moral principles. The ultimate source of law comes strictly from the sovereign's authority. This firmly established that Tier 2 deontology we talked about earlier, where compliance is the only thing that really matters. In the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes really drove this massive shift. Hobbes basically threw the whole idea of natural virtue right out the window. Instead, he famously argued that the natural state of humanity is a war of every man against every man, a condition he called solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So in his view, men join society and submit to an absolute sovereign not because they share some higher virtue, but simply to escape this miserable condition and avoid a violent death. And honestly, this represents a brutal pivot in human history. Just look at the contrast here. We moved from Aquinas' focus on virtue, human perfection, and the common good, straight into Hobbes' focus on self-preservation, fear, and mechanical submission to authority. The moral compass was basically replaced by a survival manual. We shifted from asking, why do we live, to simply asking, what are the rules so I don't get punished? Section 5. The 5 levels of order. So how do we fix this? To synthesize these dense historical shifts and maybe solve our modern paradox, we can map out a complete framework for an ideal human system. This comprehensive table lays out the exact progression we need to follow to build systems that actually make sense. Think of it like building a house. You start at level 1, protology. That's observing raw natural facts and axioms, the very ground you're building on. That feeds into level 2, metasophy, the overarching philosophy. Only after that do we reach level 3, nomocracy, the legal blueprints and governance. That then dictates level 4, taxonomy, organizing the methodology and systems. Finally ending in level 5, praxis, the concrete execution. If you just cut off those top 2 levels, you're literally just mindlessly nailing boards together with no blueprint. We can actually observe these frameworks materializing historically. For instance, a classical Latin legal maxim perfectly illustrates level 3 governance, rules for everyday conduct. On the flip side, look at an early 20th century eugenics tree diagram. Now, while historically dark objectively, it serves as a stark historical metaphor for level 4 systemology running wild. It shows exactly what happens when an institution tries to mechanically organize and categorize diverse biological inputs without any grounding moral philosophy. Ultimately, for an ideal human system to actually work, it has to bridge this gap. We absolutely have to reconnect our modern, mechanical, Tier 3 institutions, the courts, the bureaucracies, the endless daily grind, back to a Tier 1 philosophical baseline. We need systems that align with biology, that act as a true North Star for our behavior, and that guarantee genuine upward human development, rather than just forcing us into mindless compliance. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to consider. If we continue to live in a society where our systems are perfectly logical but completely lack a guiding philosophy for human flourishing, what is our true North Star? Are we actually growing as a civilization, or are we just following the rules of the machine? Definitely something to think about the next time you interact with the structures governing our world. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the architecture around you.